Are we live? All right. The City Council is moving into its second session of the evening. This particular meeting is a meeting of the Budget Committee, which is a committee of the whole of the council. This is our fifth, ideally the fifth of 5 meetings on the budget. Any questions about the agenda? Otherwise, we will call the meeting to order and move into the agenda immediately. The plan for the day, we will approve minutes. The next item is just any follow-up from prior meetings, any questions that aren't answered, any new questions, get those out. This will be a consensus-style process so that we've fully asked any questions first. The next item after that will be to discuss any proposed amendments, make sure those have been fully vetted. And then what ends up being item number 5, there'll be a motion to approve the budget, and then any amendments can be proposed at that point. And we will, whether those are amendments to add something to the budget, to deduct something from the budget, to make a transfer of some kind, or to set a proviso of some kind. We don't have to do any or all of those 4, but those are the options as we move to finally approve this budget tonight. What we are doing tonight is, as a committee of the whole, recommending a budget to send forward to public hearing on the 11th of August, and then to do a final vote on the 11th of August. With that, call the meeting to order. Item 2 is to approve the minutes from June 23rd and June 30th. I would entertain a motion to approve. You should have those by email. Councilman Jensen moves. Councilwoman Clear seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Opposed? Okay. Noted that Councilwoman Ortiz. Now that we just did that, is it okay, Mary, that we did them together?
Well, unless someone has an objection
Okay. I didn't.
to doing it together.
All right. All right, we'll move on. Number 3, follow-up from prior meetings. Any new questions? Since the session that we had on June 30th, everybody should have received by email what was called a set number 5 of questions, answers to questions. So are there any further questions, unanswered questions that people had submitted, or clarifications on these? Councilwoman Clear.
I wanted to make sure, with the fire department losing so many people retiring, is it in the budget for those positions to be filled?
There have been no,
City Manager.
thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council Member. Yeah, there are no actions that have been taken that have any impact on the number of firefighters at all.
Councilwoman Ortiz? I'm sorry. Are you finished?
Well, since we're on that, I'll bring up some of the questions I have. I know that we're short firefighters right now, and in the budget, are we looking to add any more? What exactly is in the budget? Because we are short firefighters. We have firefighters that are coming back and doing overtime, and I'm really, really concerned that we're short and we need to be fully staffed. And do we know where we're at with that in the budget?
Well, I'm happy to call the chief up here. The budget contains the same number of firefighters as we had in the previous budget. There have been no changes to that budget at all.
So how many firefighters did we have from last year? Chief, can you come up, please? Hate to put you on the spot, but I have a couple questions. So what you're saying is we haven't added any new?
Correct. We currently have 18 companies of firefighters.
And how many will retire?
Deputy Mayor, council members, Thank you for the opportunity to address that. Our budget, in 2015, we have 245 firefighters, and in 2016, we have 245 FTEs.
How many will retire?
I don't know how many will retire, but we still are budgeted to fill the full 245 positions.
Or, to be fully staffed, isn't that at 300 and something?
Not for fire. 245 is our number. We've been 245 for at least the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, I'd like to know how many will retire. And with those retiring, then you're saying we don't need any new ones to add? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that we don't need any new firefighters. I'm saying we're comfortable. I'm comfortable as fire chief with the 245 FTEs that we're budgeted for. It's the same that we're budgeted for right now. Occasionally, we will have vacancies, as we do right now, but we have a plan, and we're working close with the city manager to determine when is the best time to fill those positions.
How many vacancies do we have?
Currently, approximately 15, which include some managerial positions, which we've been given the okay to fill them. We're actually in the process of filling shift commander positions and our battalion chief positions. Literally, as we speak, we're engaged in that process.
I'd like to know how many will retire, if I could get that number, please.
That's going to be a hard number, respectfully, to make a determination on. There are a number of variables that's going to impact when a person will retire versus when someone is eligible to retire. And then we have obviously the compensatory retirements where someone, when they reach age 60, they're required to retire, with the only exception being that of fire chief position.
Okay. I know there was talk about, thank you, Chief Bailey.
Okay.
There was talk about maybe potential closing some fire stations. City manager, has that been resolved? Are we not looking at that? How does that affect our budget?
We are right now conducting 2 studies. One is a GIS study, which is being done by a company that specializes in these types of studies to identify where's the best locations of fire stations based on the city as it exists today. In addition to that, we have a study which is being conducted to review the operations of the fire department and other, a validation of the resource allocation study that was done. The GIS study will be done over the next, I believe, 4 months.
Right. The GIS will be completed on August
Oh.
31st.
So over the next couple of months, and then the other study will be done throughout the end of the year. It is our plan to continue to have a discussion about fire operations then as part of the budget discussion coming forward next year to discuss that, or if information is done prior to that, to bring it back to this body. But at this point, no decisions have been made pertaining to the number of fire stations closing or anything else. I know that some information got out. That was a presentation, a memo that the chief made to me early on. It got into the media way prior to us even having any real conversation or consideration about it.
What about the study that was done in 2006 or 2007? And I really like that study, and I'll tell you why. Because, you know, we just keep getting study after study after study after study after study. But that study said something. It said we needed a fire department in District 9. It said we needed to move fire station number 4 in Oakland, but we're not growing in Oakland. And then it said we needed a fire station south of Topeka. So, I mean, is that just sitting on the shelf? Are we not considering it? I think it's a very good study. I don't understand why we need so many studies to tell us the same thing, or maybe each study can tell us something different. Is that what we're looking for, is something different? 2 things I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about that fire station that never got built in District 9. I'm concerned about that study that we've never really looked at and implemented. And I'm also concerned about, you know, at some point, we're going to have to look at, and I know, I gave this to you several years ago, look at the wages, you know, that not only affects the fire department, but the police department and the WPC, and we've talked about that. But at some point, we're gonna have to implement that. We're gonna have to do something regarding that. And you know what I'm talking about. I gave you numbers, I gave you figures, and we talked about that. But When are we gonna address that? Because it really needs to be addressed. And that's why I'm gonna continue to sit here and say that, because I tell you what, our people, they go crazy when we start talking about shutting down fire stations, and I just think it's something that we really, really need to look at. So what about the study that was done in 2006? I meant to bring it because that says a lot of things. I don't think we need to move Station 4. I think we can leave, we're not growing. Billard's not growing. I think we need a station out south, and I think we need to get our one out west.
Deputy Mayor and Council Member, we believe that there are a lot of questions that need to be answered pertaining to the fire operations, the number of stations, the number of employees, the number of companies, the services provided, talking about BLS and ALS. There are a lot of issues that we're talking about. I know that there was the 2006 study. I don't know that there was total agreement as to how to implement that 2006 study. I think there was specifically mentioned in that the closing of 2 stations and the opening of 2 additional stations. I think by the time that I got involved in starting to have that conversation, there was no agreement as to what the agreement was, and there was, let's just open 2 additional studies, or 2 additional fire stations and hire additional companies to fill those stations. At that point, we started analyzing the resource allocation study. That resource allocation study, as it was introduced, was to identify questions and not necessarily be the be-all and end-all of anything, but to help us formulate a 3 to 5 year plan to address fire issues. Fire department's been around for a lot of years. There's a lot of decisions and a lot of history there, and while we need to make some decisions, I don't think we need to be rash, but we need to be realistic, and we need to deal with these issues right now. I feel very comfortable in working with the chief and working with the IAFF, with the local, that we're making significant progress in these regards. And we will continue to look at it, and I believe that in the next 6 to 9 months, we will have a recommendation in terms of the future of the Topeka Fire Department and what it does and how it's structured. But at this particular moment, we are not in a position to make any recommendations, to make any changes of the budget that existed in 2015.
Thank you, City Manager. Do you have more questions about fire?
No, I don't, but I do have a comment, if I may. I will be looking forward to that, and I will be looking forward to some realistic things that we need to really look at. And we're gonna have to put our feet to the fire. This council members are gonna have to vote, and it can't be political. Fire safety and public safety should be first and foremost, and we say that time and time again, but yet we're really lagging in so many areas. And I tell you what, I just cringe every time I think about a fire in Richards area, because the response time is terrible. And I just cringe to think that that's taken away from me. But we need to really, really look at this realistically. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Did you have a question
I
on
do,
fire?
yeah.
Councilman Cohen.
For the fire department to be fully staffed, what is that number?
The Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Cohen, the number of fully staffed as defined in the city of Topeka for the last 4 to 5 years has been 245 full-time equivalent firefighters.
Okay. So 245 is fully staffed?
Correct.
All right. The study, I mean, we can continue doing studies forever. And, the study that's on our website right here says we're 51 positions heavy. Where does the fire department stand on that? It seems like it was a pretty neutral, a study that was done.
And Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember, I don't want to ask the chief to answer
Okay.
that. I would prefer to answer that.
Sure.
When we did the resource allocation study, and I thought it was a good study, and it was a study really done by the city manager's office, really using people who had skills, and we defined what it was. The objective when we did that study was really to sort of test the waters and to identify just some basic issues, and really, it was to formulate additional questions. Yes, we know what it said in terms of the comparison between Topeka and the rest of the 17 other communities that we compared itself to, but I don't think that it's really totally defensible study in terms of understanding the impact on operations and some of the other things. We worked very closely with not only the leadership and, of the fire department and members of the membership of the IFF, but we also talked to other people who are in the profession. And as a result of that, we've outlined the game plan. And I get it that we're talking about this study and that study and that study and the 2006 study. I don't think that anybody knows me or knows my management team thinks that we let a lot of grass grow under our feet. I mean, we're working hard, but a fast decision isn't always the right decision. The right decision is the right decision. And at the point in time where we feel like we've fully vetted this information and that we fully understand not just the implications financially, but the implications on public safety, the implications on interactions with other entities within the community that also touch not just fire, but also medical and emergency medical response, I think we're on the right path. And I've certainly heard what many people have said, but I can only do things the way that I believe they should be done. And certainly open to a lot of input, but I think we're following the right path. We're doing the GIS study, we're doing the operations study, we're working very closely with other fire departments and other professionals in this, and we will bring back to this body what we think is the best recommendation to go forward. And beyond that, I can't do better.
Any other, I'd like us to draw things together as much as we can and then move on from topics. Not that you can't bring up something later, but are there any other questions or comments or concerns about fire? All right, did you have others? I do, but I probably. All right. I thought you had a string of them, but I wanted to get him in on the fire, so, continue.
Okay, I want to talk about city council. I was looking on reimbursement for cell phones, and I don't quite understand, is Nikki here, or do I just ask you, Jim? That's 1,800. And also, that's one of my questions, did we leave do we have a part-time employee in there still? Is that still in there?
I'm gonna have Nikki.
Nikki Lee.
Thank you. I was hidden back, I couldn't see you and you couldn't see me over the
I
podium.
can't see you.
I can scoot over.
You can sit down, I don't care, just answer my question.
So what that cell phone allocation is based on is at the time when we set the budget, we look at what everybody in every department is making at that time, and then set the budget on that same amount. So I don't have the exact breakout with me, but that's based on what people are making today. We projected that going forward to 16.
18. Is that 18?
2016, sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm talking 1800, you're talking
Yeah.
2060. So we don't really know if that's needed or not?
That's what we're spending right now, so as long as everybody that's currently getting cell phone reimbursements is gonna keep getting it, that's the amount that would be spent.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a part-time employee in the council office? Is that a position for 2016? It looks like it.
So what that is previously, off and on, we've had a 0.5 FTE in the council office. We actually moved that FTE, like if you look at that FTE history on the council budget, it goes from 1.5 and 15 down to 1. So we moved the position, but the dollars were left in there really to give flexibility for staffing. We're kind of filling out the council office and exactly figuring out what staffing is needed with that in the city manager's office. So it was kind of a decision just to leave it in at that point to make sure that dollars were in there in case there was some other help needed. But I would say that by the time you see the 17 budget, that decision should be made at that point.
Okay, so it's in, is what you're saying for part-time?
There are dollars in the budget, yes.
I wish we would fill that position. I think it's a much-needed position. It's very frustrating when I call the council office, and Angela has every right to go on vacation. It's frustrating when you don't get a live person. So I'd like to see us fill that position. I'd really like to see us fill it with a full-time. Also, I wanted to know, we used to have we used to subscribe to the Topeka Capital Journal. Is that in our budget here? Because I didn't see it anywhere.
I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. If it is in there, it's buried into, we have subscription lines and contractual services lines, so it'd be in one of those, but.
Well, the reason
top
I'm
of my head,
asking
I can't
is,
tell you
I had
that.
asked Angela to pull something for me, and she said that we no longer had it. We got rid of it because we didn't need it. But I feel like we do for different things that we might want to get it, and I thought it was helpful. Jenny would pull up different things. Also, the voice, I see that the voice and data on communications is on almost in every budget, in every department. What exactly is that?
That helps, and IT may be able to give more information, but for departments that have their own, like if you need certain wireless access to get the internet or any kind of different, different items in your department to help you get internet or any kind of data or any kind of voice related to your phones, that's the amount of money that your department needs to pay for to access what you need to operate. That's one area that I know when Angela stepped in, she looked at that long and hard to figure out, do we need X and Y, do we need all these phones? And she worked with IT to talk about that, but that's really for phones and then internet connections.
To 2 desks or 1 desk? How many does that?
I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. IT may be able to, but it also, I know part of it covers what's in the council chambers, so it may not just be those 2 desks.
So I think, so some of that might be Wi-Fi then?
Yes.
And so we pay for Wi-Fi?
Whatever
in the chamber?
whatever department is using that phone or that Wi-Fi, then your department would be the one to pay for it.
Wow, because I think everybody uses Wi-Fi in here. Okay. Anyway, I can't strongly say how, I know we had 2 people in the council office, and I think they were doing a good job, and we have, not taking anything away from Angela. I think she's doing her best to get caught up to speed, but it'd be nice to have 2 full-time people in there. And I think the clerks do a pretty good job too, but, I would like to see that. That's all I have for that right now. You can go ahead. I'll come back. You can come back to me.
Other new questions, new issues? You may be it, but we'll offer it out here. Let's say Councilwoman Ortiz, continue. We've pretty much used the meeting times. While she's looking, one of the things that did come to my attention well into the game, we do probably need to, I would recommend that we make sure there is a routine next year that the council itself gets an opportunity to look at the council's budget before it's submitted. We are basically function like a city department. The city departments start working on that in March, and so we didn't get a chance to have some input when this went in, but that could easily happen in a future year, and I would certainly recommend it. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Neighborhood relations, I see that we have, $52,100 in overtime pay. What exactly is that for?
I'm gonna have Sasha.
City manager, Sasha, Ms.
Yep.
Stiles? Sasha Stiles, head of neighborhood relations.
We'll have to get exact clarification for you and follow up, but our property maintenance inspectors do attend the Neighborhood Improvement Association meetings. That's overtime expense to us. In addition, I'm sure there's overtime pay for building inspectors when we have folks go on vacation and we've got inspections and plan reviews to cover.
So we went from 0 to 52,100 in 2016? Because I thought that was a part of their job, and I thought they got comp pay for that off the clock. And not all of them go to the NIAs. You know, I can tell you which ones do, so.
That was next. You'll recall the budget manager pointing out to you previously that neighborhood relations is a combination of other departments.
Okay.
So in all likelihood, the expenses that you're referring to would have been included in the police department's budget and public works, because development services was formerly in the public works budget and property maintenance was in the police department budget. So that wouldn't be a new expense. It would show up new in the neighborhood relations budget because we're new.
Okay, so that's why it would go from 0 to 52.
Yes, ma'am.
So that wouldn't necessarily be your code officers then?
We we can offer them comp time, but we can't force them to take it to attend the evening meetings.
And you can't also force them to go to the meetings, because all of them don't go to meetings because they said they're not required to go, so a lot of them don't go. Now, I'm just telling you what I've been told, so that's kind of why I'm
Yes.
asking that question.
I understand. I've given them a directive that I expect their attendance at least quarterly. Their contract requires us to give them 7 days of notice prior to their attendance being required at outside of normal 8 to 5 p.m. meetings.
Is that new?
Not that I'm aware of. I do not believe that's a new provision in their contract. So we have to give them 7 days' notice, and we also have to, again, we can offer them the option for comp time. Some do take that because it banks at time and a half, just like overtime would bank into their paycheck. But if they turn it in as overtime pay, we have to pay it as overtime pay. We can't force them to take comp time.
Okay. And I'll be watching, because like I said, I have a few NIAs that we never see code officers, and I have some NIAs that they see a code officer there every single meeting.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so that's why I'm asking, is that new, is that different? Because the people they enjoy seeing them there.
I understand, and I completely agree with you. And again, I've given them the directive that I expect their attendance at least quarterly. I know that Richard is working with Jackie to iron out details on how we provide them notice according to their contract provisions. Some employees will hold us to the letter of that contract, while others are very eager to go and interact with the citizens. So we want to make sure that we follow the guidelines of the contract.
Absolutely. There was also a provision for, let's see. Oh, I seen this one. It was like, management buildings. It's on, management grounds. What in the world is that? 196,565.
So
Nikki, that's on page 37.
Is that 5220? Can you give me the exact account?
It's 526010. So are we like splitting up our groundskeeping or our management of that?
So, if you remember, a few years ago, the facilities fund was introduced. So actually, each department pays into the facilities fund, but that's the building and maintenance charge, that 52602 that you're looking at. The 52601, that's the one you're asking about, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
That one's actually the portion of, that the neighborhood relations pays into the inmate program. So we talked a little bit at one of the early meetings about the way that we fund the inmate crew program is by charging the departments that use it the most. And really, neighborhood relations for codes and those kinds of issues is one of the biggest users, so that would be the portion for that.
At a tune of 136,000.
What we do is we base it on prior year usage, and actually the cost that it would be to contract and pay for those services for someone else to do it would be a lot higher than that. So that's the portion that they need to pay into the program to support the program.
I guess I'm concerned because it went from 1,000 to 136,000. So we, in 2013 and 2014, I mean, this program's been around for a while, so we were only charging them we were only being charged 1,000 at that particular time, or was it somewhere else in the budget?
Yeah, so like Sasha just explained, the neighborhood relations budget prior was split out into multiple different areas. So part of the 15, 13, and 14 years, part of it was in police, part of it was in public works, and part of it was in the former H&D, which is part of what's included here. So that's part of why it's hard to look at that history from year to year. So actually, neighborhood relations, or the former H&D and former codes, had been paying into the inmate crew at really similar levels. So it's just been moved around from other parts of the budget.
Okay, all right. It just, that's a big jump, and it just kind of stands out. It says grants, on page 36, let's see, right? No, 38. And it says grants, contributions, other agencies. What exactly is that at a tune of 300,000? Is that, SORT grant and all that?
This is where we budget for the social service grants.
Social service, okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, and I wondered because underneath it, it says grants, youth, and social service. So that's why I was thinking it wasn't, because underneath it, it says social service.
What we have is, in the social service grant process, we have two buckets of money. We have contractual services, and then we have what we've been traditionally calling the youth and social service portion. So those are actually, we budget those in two separate line items, but they all go through the ECD process that you're gonna hear the recommendations for at next week's meeting. That's what those are for.
Okay. It would have been a little helpful if maybe, I don't know, put that in parentheses, I don't know, because it looks like it's something different.
Okay.
The 1,500 for, human food. And the reason why I'm asking about this, I mean, you're laughing, but we had a very bare bones budget. We took a whole lot of, all of that out, and now I'm seeing it kind of sneak its way back in. And so that's why I'm asking about it.
Well, I can give you a good example. We're about to host or co-host a meeting for the development community with planning department to talk about our development processes. We've decided that the best opportunity that we have to capture the most developers is to offer a lunch meeting for them. We need to buy lunch for them in order to get them to attend. So it would be meetings like that we would be requesting folks to come in on the lunch hour to try to take advantage of a free hour that they would have during the day. But that's an example of a meeting that we'll be having very soon, and we could have 30 to 40 developers show up. We'll need to feed them.
And like I said to the council, I'll be looking at that. Thank you, Sasha. And I think it's a great idea, but when you're dealing with a bare bones budget, and like I said, it went from $100 to $1,500, I just think sometimes if we go to Hy-Vee in some of these places and ask them to donate, that's what happened with our budget when we took out travel, because all the other departments were taking out stuff. So we decided we too needed to take out something and not just ask our other departments to do that. So we took out travel and we have a bare bones. So I just see a lot of things sneaking back in there. That's all I have for right now, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilman Shum.
If I could follow up on Councilwoman Ortiz's comments just briefly. One thing that concerns me, and full disclosure, I worked for Raleigh County Police Department as a civilian. So I was part of their FOP auxiliary. I was part of the wage studies they did. So I'll admit bias right up front. But when we are moving from a bare bones budget to a budget that's more fluffed out, it concerns me if we end up leaving police officers behind on their wages. I don't want to go to the police force and say there's no money for increased wages for you or for a fair wage, but we have an extra $150,000 to put downtown. We have the extra $60,000 for the arts, because it sends the wrong message to our officers about where our priorities are. Thank you.
Councilwoman? Clear.
So I'll follow up with that on what city manager had told me. If we do decide to pay them what they should be paid, there is money to be moved around in this budget, which is what you had said at the last budget meeting.
If I can.
Please.
What I said at the last budget meeting is this budget included a placeholder number which was based on the authorization that was provided by this body, which is the numbers roughly in the $400,000 total salary increase. I think it was 1% and a step. In terms of moving it around and finding money from other places, I do not believe that is a statement that I made.
Oh, that's what I understood.
Okay, well, if you understood it, I'm clarifying right now. What I said last time, and, or certainly what I meant to say last time, and I'm happy to go back and look at it, is this budget included the specific authorization that was provided by this body as we went into negotiations. If there was a determination, and this is maybe what we're talking about, if there was a determination made by this body that they wanted to do something different than what was put in as a placeholder, we would then have the obligation to go in and find that money, whether it came from other areas or whether it reduced the fund balance.
And what is the amount that was, I wasn't here then, what was the amount that was approved?
Yeah. So, just to clarify, what we included in the number and was the negotiated amount was one step plus a 1% increase, and that equaled about $400,000. But we can talk about this, but we have a long way to go on police negotiations. And we're certainly, now is not the time to negotiate the police contract. We need to do that with the FOP first. We will then, as a management team, bring this back to you, and you can take whatever action you choose to take.
But if our budget's finalized, what do you do then?
Well, as I stated, we put the placeholder in the budget.
Right. Okay, what if?
If a determination is made by this body after we go through whatever we need to go through to get the contract done, we then would have to go in, and the easiest thing would just to be increase the budget. I mean, increase the budget and then eat it in some of the general fund, or during the year, look for other savings. But to talk about whether we're talking about $100,000 or $100 million is very premature, because we haven't negotiated the contract yet.
Mr. Gerber has some more answer for you, I think.
I was just going to refer to the body to page 3, and that spells out what the assumptions are for each of the bargaining units that we are having negotiations with at this point.
And there also are numbers in that overview on page 9 that show what's available for the increases, as well as what's in the pool for this one right here, what's in the pool for the contracts.
Well, and I understand that, and that's okay. I just don't want to get this budget approved, have negotiations go on, we come back, we agree, and somebody goes, oh, sorry, there's just no money, we can't find any in there. I mean, yeah, we don't need to hash it out now, but I don't want this budget finalized, done, and then we don't have the funds to give appropriate salary increases.
So, Deputy Mayor, and there is no other way to do it. I mean, based on and Doug can walk through the schedule and what we need to do. We have the ability, so I'm going to get back to the statement that you started with. If we end up ultimately signing a contract with the FOP that has an incremental amount of $100,000, $300,000, we can absorb that within the existing budget. We either do that through internal fixes that we can do administratively, or we can reduce the city's fund balance at this particular point. But I have to caution the body that we have a long way to go on negotiations, and I understand that various people have certain opinions about what we should or shouldn't do. But we have to go through the negotiations, and we have to go through the approval process. We can't do it now. It would be futile to do it now.
Other comments about the police, since we're on that? Okay. Councilwoman?
On the executive department on page 23, what is the equipment non-capital? It is 55800.
Nikki here.
for 70,000.
That's this.
I'm testing you, Nikki.
No, what that is that's actually related to the executive budget that you see including the communications division. And that's related to the amount that's been dedicated for upgrade for any AV equipment. So actually, the amount that was approved in 2013 was for the years 2013 through 2017, it'd be 70,000 a year.
Okay. And have we had any communication with the county regarding helping us pay this bill? Or any
Yeah,
extra
well,
money?
Yes, we have. We're not done yet. What I had, Ms. Van Dyke, put together analysis of how much it costs us. We have, reached out to, the chairman of the county commission, and we are going to, have a conversation and come back. I don't remember what the number was.
Well,
Is that
any-
$9,000? Yeah, we anticipated that the cost of us providing those services to the county were about $9,000 a year.
Just to them?
Yeah, that's the cost of us providing it specifically to them. The number of, we did it on an hourly basis, the cost of, so,
Over a year? Is
over a
that-
year,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, thank you.
Jonathan. Councilman Shum.
Thank you so very much. The deputy city manager salary that we've been keeping on the books, is there a reason for that? Are we concerned if we take it off the books, it'll be harder to fill later? Do we have plans to look for a deputy city manager next year?
Yes. So this is awkward.
That was 4 questions, so yes to everything?
No, so yes, we've maintained that because the expectation is that we would fill that position. We're not exactly sure how we're doing, how we would ultimately do it in terms of whether we would promote somebody internally to that job and whether that person's responsibilities would be taken on by other people, or whether we would hire maybe somebody at a different level within the organization to pick up some of that, in fairness to the organization as a whole and to this body. Yes, we have an expectation that even somebody such as Mr. Gerber might qualify for that type of job. But we have to go through the process, and we don't have that ultimately determined. And what I had shared with this body, that I thought it was very important as I came in and we made as many changes that we did, that I would have more direct ties with each of the department heads, and that I would be more actively involved in the organization. As we've continued to develop the organizational structure, it is running much more smoothly. We're starting to move into some other areas where it probably is the time that we would talk about actually filling that position. But we're not ready to do that today, but we want to maintain that.
Questions? Others? Before I go back to Councilwoman Ortiz? All right. Councilwoman?
I just wanted to know, Nikki, on the printing and advertising in the fire department, we went from 2,000 to 8,000. Do we know what that's for?
I couldn't give you those specifics. I can either follow up. I'm not sure if the chief knows off the top of his head, but I can tell you that we can follow up with you.
Okay, that is on page 32, top of the page, 524000.
Would you be comfortable with us sending that to you in a follow-up? Okay, thanks.
Nothing further? Anybody else with anything new or clarification on communication number 5? Otherwise, we will move on then to the next agenda item, which is to discuss the potential amendments. If people want to float some ideas and see what kind of interest, if any, there is amongst the council That's the plan for this section. I have come into this with a short list of issues that had come up before, so I will go ahead and roll those out, and we'll get started with that. And then if people have other items that you want to bring forth to consider, you don't have to do that at this point. We will do motions in the next agenda item. The biggest item that came forward to all of us was a proposal that, about streets and street maintenance, prevention and maintenance work. It came in a couple of different forms over a couple of different times. I have checked with staff prior to this meeting, and their intent, reviewing maybe some disconnects between some descriptions of money and so on, is that the written document that we got on June 23rd from them, amended only by, and if people need a copy, it got late, so I just made some. I can pass them around. The only exception to what was on that June 23rd document, as per an email that I got today, is that there was some miscommunication, and annual striping, the work of striping on the streets is done by a different department and is already covered and would not be covered by this new funding. So with that, we do have that update that staff has proposed would be on the table. Brendan, do you have some overall comments about the street plan?
Well, just in working through the process with a lot of folks, it's very important for us to maintain the infrastructure that we have, and that in turn is both sealing the cracks that arise just from routine weather. As everyone knows, filling potholes is a huge issue to the folks in our community. It costs our citizens an incredible amount of money in terms of vehicle damage, and it's also a public safety issue. So street maintenance is incredibly important, and in the past we have not done that or been able to do that in the way that we needed to, and this is a great start in getting us back to doing what ultimately we should have been doing anyway. And I think this is something that our citizens in every district will very much appreciate. Thank you.
Okay. Any other conversation about the street proposal? Councilwoman Schwartz.
I have a real problem with, there's 77 streets that are still on the 10-year plan that have not been done. And so I will just voice my opinion that I don't think moving $800,000, buying a new street cleaning equipment for $220,000 is a very smart move to do that. So I have heard from the constituents in my district that, and I even asked in Sherwood how often they clean their streets, and it's once a year. I just think that if we're going to clean them every 2 months, we're really swinging the pendulum from one end way to the other end. So I am not supporting the idea that we move that much money around to do the street cleaning. Thank you.
Councilman Jensen?
And
City manager may want to react unless you're going to cover that, so.
Go ahead, speak for me.
This is more about street maintenance and street cleaning. I would mention that in other districts, you could clean the street once a month, and it's still full of dirt and leaves and debris. It's more about protecting the assets that we have currently and preventing further decay. $800,000 does not pave or even mill and overlay a great deal, and this is the opportunity to launch a street maintenance program in the entire city. So our options are work on a tiny little part of one district, or start a robust maintenance project or maintenance plan for the entire city. Thank you.
I did want to clarify, and the city manager may want to respond to this proposal. There was discussion of every other month or something. This proposal is 4 times a year for these dollars and so on. So just wanted to clarify that. Councilwoman Cleary.
I too had a problem, but I also understand that. So I was thinking, well, maybe four people could make a dent, and not such a large amount to start with. Maybe 4 new people. I don't know about the sweeper. Still up in the air on that one.
City Manager?
Thank you. I actually am going to ask Mr. Whitaker to come forward, and as he's walking up here, I'm gonna make a couple of comments. I think it's unfortunate that when we talked about this, we started talking about maintenance, and then it came into a street sweeping conversation. And the street sweeping became important because it was one of those things that we were pulling people off of all of the other tasks and bringing them back. So it is unfortunate that this did become a street sweeping conversation as opposed to how do we really maintain, because there's none of us that go anywhere in town without somebody saying, hey, what a great job, I haven't seen a pothole all day. No, that doesn't happen. We get the opposite on a regular basis. So these are serious issues, and it isn't a matter of just street sweeping, but street sweeping is important from a very large perspective. The second thing is that there has been a lot of reference made to the 70-ish streets that were not done. And I've asked Mr. Whitaker to pull together some information about that, and things aren't always as they appear. And one of the things that we have tried to do, by the way, I am washed out on that picture there too, so.
We'll get you some better lighting.
I'll get some darker hair, or hair. I think the thing that we have tried to bring this organization, when I say we, I mean all of us, and the senior leaders within this organization, is to bring a better decision-making process and to bring a more informed decision-making process. So sometimes, and I'll say this so Doug doesn't have to and see his head get hot, sometimes we're held to defending things that none of us had anything to do with. And some decisions were made in the past that we wouldn't have made those same decisions. We wouldn't have assigned the same values to how much it would cost to do certain things. So just as an introduction, and hopefully that saves you from slamming your fist. I want to see it.
Okay.
Doug Whitaker, Director of Public Works.
Deputy Mayor, City Manager, Council. What we've done is we've looked back, and I know when we made the presentation, we said street sweepers. And I think when we were doing that, we were identifying a function, but it was street maintenance is what we were trying to explain and say that we need additional help. The question, as I remember, that came back to us was, are we fully funded for street maintenance? The answer is no. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, it's no. And so we presented the fact of if we developed a street sweeping group, that just gave us 8 additional personnel. I know we're not, and by no means am I headed there, but my staff tells me that 20 years ago there was just under 100 in the street department. There's 33 now. So we've cut way down. By no means am I going to stand here and with the city manager let me say we need to get back to 100. That's not where we're trying to get to. What we're trying to get to is maintain the streets for you. And unfortunately, when we did when I say unfortunately, when the book was made up for the half-cent sales tax, this map here, and I'm not going to hand it out because we haven't had a chance to vet it all the way through. We put it together in the GIS system. This was all of the streets we were supposed to get done in the first 5 years. It was like 120 some miles of street. And with that, it was set up to do as mill and overlay. Mill and overlay was what they started on, and I've talked to what staff was still here back in 2009-10 when they started, and they were going to do, it was mill and overlay and full depth patching as they needed to. What happened was they basically were going every other panel and were doing full depth replacement. That made no sense. I mean, from an economic standpoint, you rip everything out and you start over versus trying to do panel, skip, panel, skip. It was a nightmare for the contractor, it was a nightmare for our staff. So with that, we went back, and then you start talking on a 2-lane road, it's roughly $500,000 a mile for mill and overlay. It's a little over $1 million for street reconstruction. And so all of a sudden you see we started cutting, and that was on the 2-lane. You start talking, most of our arterials that were listed there first, in those first few years, they're 3 to 5 lane sections. So again, you've got to get, it takes more money to do each of those sections. So with that said, we inherited that. I came in about 2 years ago. I don't have all the answers, but we had to make some decisions. And, the decision is, what roads do we work on? And we tried to narrow it down and work on those that really made sense and that added to the city's infrastructure. When I say added, improve the city's infrastructure is what I should look at. With that, when we went into the county half-cent sales tax extension, we tried to stay, and I know the former one went outside the city, didn't go outside the city, but went out in the outside, perimeter of the city. When we looked at the county half-cent sales tax this time, we tried to concentrate on the core. We were looking at Huntoon, 12th, those type of streets, Adams, California, those areas that we were in our core area, and that's where we needed to spend the money to get those streets upgraded. The other thing that if you look at what we've had to do with a lot of our major arterials is complete streets is much more important to this. When I won't say much more important, is important to the city and to the planning staffs there. Under the half-cent sales tax, we couldn't improve streets. We could replace streets, but we couldn't improve them. So then we had to find, because sidewalks, everybody's coming saying, I need more sidewalks. We couldn't add those under the half-cent sales tax. So we had to find other functions, or funding sources. The other is, as we started tearing streets out, as Mr. Gerber knows, we had to look at, if we're gonna put down millions of dollars on the ground, we better be looking at what's underneath it, because to be honest with you, a lot of our street conditions are because of water main breaks. When the water main breaks, how much water comes out. We have no idea how much of the sub base it ripped out when that water main blew underground. So we try to repair to a point, and then you lose, if it wasn't repaired everywhere, as you've got bad sub base, that's when we beat a street to death, especially in an arterial or a collector. So I know I've said a lot, but that is the issue, and that we need to get into street maintenance. And yes, sweeping is a portion of it, and I don't want to just get hung up there. Sweeping is a portion of it, but we've got pavement management is the other thing that we really need to get into and be doing. And what that will do for us is, you have newer streets out there, but it's just like your car. I guess I'd look at it as an example. If you never change the oil in your car, your engine's gonna quit eventually. And that's what's happening to our streets. If we're doing nothing to these new streets, we're all gonna end up down here in the pile of junk that we have in a lot of areas. And if we only spend our money down here, every new street that we've done is coming right back to this direction. And so somehow we've got to get around here and look at doing maintenance over here to preserve this, and then keep whittling away at this area down here at the bottom. And so I guess with that, I will take any further questions.
Councilman Harmon.
Thank you. When Neil Doler was Public Works Director, he had a graph, and now maybe you have it too, that shows that when a street starts to, this is a graph showing the condition of the street, if you put money in, just as the street begins to deteriorate, you push its failure rate out a considerable number of years. Whereas if you don't put any money in, when the street starts to degrade, it immediately falls to a position where you have to replace the entire street. So in terms of the best utilization of funds, we really need, and I think this is what you're saying, Doug, you really need to start putting money in when we first detect a street beginning to degrade, because graphically, that will push its failure rate out a number of years. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So, and I don't know if you still have that graph, or you can get it from Neil, but it's a very good representation of why you need to do preventive maintenance, so you can push out the life expectancy of a street considerable number of years. Or if you don't put any money into it, then you're very rapidly in a position where you have to replace the entire street. You have to actually go out and tear it out. So I think it's a good idea that we're putting emphasis on preventive, because that ultimately is the best use of our precious sales tax funds. And on the street sweeper issue, Doug Gerber mentioned this the other day. It's really not a matter of aesthetics. in terms of street sweep. Doug, didn't you say that our stormwater permits require that we sweep streets? And isn't that really why we sweep our streets, to prevent the debris from getting in our stormwater system?
Deputy Mayor, Councilman Harmon. That's certainly a big factor in why we would sweep our streets. Certainly aesthetics plays a
Sure.
piece of it, but yeah, our NPDES permit, which is our stormwater quality permit, has those requirements in it of a street sweeping plan. And
But does that,
that impacts us from both a quality and a quantity perspective. And
Okay.
both those impact our stormwater utility.
okay, so that's part of our permit then, that we have a street sweeping program?
That's
Is that
correct.
Okay, does it say how often the streets have to be swept?
It says you're supposed to implement best management practices.
Okay.
So what's that?
Since the permitting requires that we have a street sweeping program, ultimately, not this budget year, but ultimately, shouldn't that function be paid for by the stormwater utility?
Councilman, I think that is a discussion that those of us in the stormwater utility would be willing to have, but I think it would need to be accompanied by an appropriate funding and personnel level.
Well,
Yes.
true, I'm looking at it from a broader policy point of view. Yes, I understand that we probably don't have the funds in stormwater to do that now, but it just makes rational sense to me that if an impetus for the street sweeping program is to meet a stormwater utility permit, then that fund should bear at least part of the expense of the street sweeping program. And I realize that's not going to occur this budget year, but down the road, as we look at possible changes in our stormwater utility, that we should at least have that discussion, I would think.
If I can
There
insert
really
one
wasn't,
other-
there wasn't a question in there ultimately.
Well, but there was another clarification along the way regarding this proposal, and that was that there had been some discussion in the early days about cleaning out the storm drains as well, that we were really not doing that as much as we should. You know, Keep America Beautiful has these campaigns to get citizens to help and so on, and that is currently, correct me if I'm wrong, under water pollution control. And so, and this proposal at this point does not propose increasing our activity in that arena. So that's still out there to get the leaves that do get down into those drains, upgrade that part of the program, correct?
Deputy Mayor, you're correct. That's a WPC function currently.
So,
Thank you, Your Honor.
City Manager.
Thank you. I think it's important to note that we're really, so two pre-comments here. Number one is, we're really being hitched to some decisions that got made in the past pertaining to a lack of a deferred maintenance situation. And I can't stress this enough. It's not just Topeka, it's everywhere. The United States has fallen so far behind on a world basis that the quality and the maintenance of its infrastructure. We used to be number one in a dominant manner. We're now number 26 in the world in terms of quality of infrastructure. Number two, we have been dealing with this on funds that have no stability to them at all. We're dependent on the state for the motor fuel tax funds. We're talking about the use of the half-cent sales tax, and we all have a little bit of an issue with spending money for the construction of new roads on maintenance, though we know it's necessary to lower the overall cost of those new roads over the long term. But we've had a lot of conversations internally that, yes, this is not the year to do it, but maybe over the next couple of years, start transitioning this to a more permanent fund, such as the general fund or something that we're not guessing as to where the money's gonna come from or whether the money's going to be available. And there's nobody sitting at this dais or in the audience who doesn't want the same thing. We want quality streets. we want streets that are maintained, and the question is, how do you get there? What we're trying to do from a professional staff perspective is to bring our best recommendation based on modern practices and best practices around the country based on our experiences and our studies. And that's what we brought to you today and during this budget process.
Thank you, City Manager. If we could clarify just a couple of things along those lines. Correct me if I'm wrong, other members of the body, but the sense that I got when this got discussed first was that everybody was in many ways relieved to hear the discussion about how many people we needed to do prevention, and that people are very eager to do that. But at the same time, the issue then would not be so much whether we wanted to do it, but whether that money would come out of the money to either repave or rebuild those streets that had already deteriorated. And so part of the concern then was, and you've just touched on it a little bit, was how long it would take. Like, would your proposal be that we'd be using, the proposal we have in front of us is to use 700,000 roughly of, take commodities out of the street rebuilding fund, but that would postpone some of those 77 that still aren't addressed, very obviously. And so we need to figure out when we're going to get to them so that they're, the maintenance could be done. So you did put some language in here that was hopefully short-term. What is your thought then? Would we be approving, or should we approve just 1 year? Or do you think it could take multiple years of drawing this money out of the half-cent sales tax fund?
Well,
For
we're only
maintenance.
approving this year, right now. It is our expectation that a lot of this, we want to play catch-up in many regards this year. We would like to have the opportunity to study that transition, and my expectation, and this is purely my expectation only without all of the research, is that we'd like to maybe eat 50% of it into a stabilized force fund next year, and eat the remaining 50% and be within 2 years after this one to have it totally out of the half-cent sales tax or any other motor fuel tax fund.
Okay.
That is the objective and the very high-level conversations that we've had at the staffing level up to this point.
Thank you. And a second question to go with that, the number that was introduced when we first talked about it was roughly that $700,000. This proposal adds another $250,000 to come out of the half-cent sales tax money to improve the amount of money we're spending on alley maintenance. That wasn't discussed at first, and so what's the prognosis that you see there, whether that's really needed in addition to the 700, and then how long that might last? City Manager.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't think it's an accurate statement to say that it wasn't. It was part of the original presentation when we talked about the Neighborhood Streets Initiative. We specifically stated that alleys was a very important part of it. And so I know that sometimes there's a lot of words that are used, but it's always been our expectation that alleys are absolutely vital. Now, unfortunately, alleys aren't easy, and there's a lot of issues that go with utilities and design of alleys and access from a long-term utility and maintenance perspective in the alleys. So when we talked about it, we did include, this isn't by way of correction, it's just reminding people that isn't something that we added. In fact, I think in several of the conversations I had with people, it's always included, hey, alleys are very important to us. So that, just a clarification there.
No doubt about that. And then how long would you hope that this would, how soon could we move it out of the half-cent sales tax, I guess?
I don't have an answer at this particular point. I think we really need to take a look at what the alley program is going to look like. I thought the alley program was going to be the simplest thing we did. It's probably going to prove to be one of the more difficult things that we do, just because of its impact on utilities and access from the sanitation trucks and everything else. It's a challenge.
Thank you. Other questions or Mayor?
No, thank you. The way I look at this, well, I think two things. First of all, the comment about the number of people who worked in the maintenance a number of years ago to what it is now. Those of us that were here in 2010 when we made significant cuts in staff, we questioned at the time if these were if they were good decisions. And I think we realized at the time that we were cutting very strongly to get our expenses down and that we would have to come back. So I think that's part of the process that we're looking at. And the other is, on this issue, I see we have really three pots of money for streets. We have some general funds we could use there. We could use the motor fuel tax. We could have the half-cent sales tax, which right now has more funds for a number of reasons than we can spend. We can't spend all the money in it there just on building streets because we don't have enough contractors. We can't roll enough out. So I think it's appropriate this year to move some of that money into other areas like to help maintenance. And then next year, we have to look at this again. So I think it's an appropriate step to do it. That's difficult. I have difficulty in saying that because I believe so strongly also in following the plan and getting the streets built. But I think for 1 year, the maintenance is so valuable and we're so far behind, that's now almost coming up as a bigger issue. So I support the idea of using some of the half-cent sales tax for the street maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I am not suggesting that anybody would come up with alternative suggestions, but if anybody wants to float any, now would be a good time to do it. Councilman.
I'm encouraged by the idea of getting more employees out fixing potholes. The hang-up for me, and I think for some other council members, is that 4 number. Jumping from sweeping the streets once a year or less to 4. I'd be more amenable to 2 of those street sweeping times being dedicated, city employees going out and filling potholes with the extra employees instead of sweeping the streets for this year, and then gradually moving up perhaps to 3 times a year or 4 times a year street sweeping, just so the public can see the streets both improving and being maintained. To go from 0 to 1 to 4 is a huge jump, and it smells of frivolity. I understand that there are concerns about why it might be necessary, but sometimes it takes folks a while to get used to new programs, and we may shoot ourselves in the foot if the public perception is we're sweeping streets but not filling potholes. So I'd like to see more of a concentrated effort on that. Is that possible that we could use those additional employees for that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councilmember. So I'll go back to my original comment. It's really unfortunate that this whole conversation has become fixated on street sweeping. What we're really talking about is having a fully staffed maintenance crew that we can get out there and do what needs to be done. In all honesty, whether it's 2 times, 3 times, 4 times a year, while it's material, I think it's more important that we are responding to the needs of the moment and that we have a regular plan. But we probably get, how many pothole calls do we get a week?
Well, we get probably, easily 100.
So I agree with you. Potholes are more important to me than street sweeping. Street sweeping has an impact as part of the overall maintenance program, but if all you're doing is sweeping the streets, English is my first language. So, I don't think I could. So, your message is heard, and we're not arguing over it. We're just saying we need more people who have skills that can do all of the maintenance. And it isn't even potholes and street sweeping, it's crack sealing, it's doing major repairs in certain areas, and it's a lot. So what we're asking is to really make that investment this year. Let's take a really big step towards getting caught up, and then let's continue to make adjustments as we go forward. But this isn't all about getting out there and having somebody sweep the streets every day.
Although there was a request for scheduling, if that was
Agreed.
possible, so people could move their cars. Councilman Jensen.
And scheduling is a very important part of it, but again, let's get the program up and going, let's see how it works, and then we'll talk about scheduling.
Any other comments on this subject? If not, let's go ahead and touch on a related subject, which was streetlights, that sort of emerged out of the budget conversations, almost new. Councilman.
I will just say that I believe this is an illuminating topic.
That's it?
Okay, that was a joke.
I'd like to float for consideration that, similar to some of the other conversations that we had, since that was so new, that maybe developing a plan for streetlights over the course of 2016 or 2015 into 2016 with the idea of being able to have a better planned approach to how we would do it and where and how we would pay for the long-term costs might be wiser than trying to add more just now through the budget process. I'm open, but I'll throw that out for discussion on that subject. Mayor?
I have a question. On page 9, where we went through the significant contractual expenditures, the second section down, the second line says electricity, primarily street lights, signals. Maybe could you provide the background, what you probably did the first night, again, on, was that incorporating some additional street lights?
Sure. Mayor, what that represents is the potential rate increase that Westar had been proposing. So we actually, this is our biggest line item for electricity in the budget. So we increased this by quite a bit to accommodate for a potential rate increase. This is one area, though, where, as we've just been talking about, if this is an area that we kind of need to watch and work on a plan, if that Westar rate increase comes in less than we projected, which hopefully it will, because we projected pretty high, this could be an area where maybe this 16 budget could include opportunity to add streetlights. But that original estimate was based on the assumption that we'd have exactly what we had today, but that our electric costs would be going up.
Thank you.
Councilman Shum, then Jensen.
Certainly. If I could speak to it, we have a waiting list, and we've had a waiting list. And I understand we're talking 800,000 to fix streets and do a maintenance program. We're talking 30,000 to clear that waiting list. I don't think 30,000 is too much to allocate this year to address and put streetlights in for people that have been waiting for years and been told there's no money to do it. And that's why I floated that amendment. It's a problem that seems easy enough to fix. I almost hate to send it to committee and see if we can develop a plan to fix it, because that's a very politician thing to do. And I think the cry we've heard from most of our citizens is they want action, and they wanted it yesterday, on streets, on streetlights, on sidewalks. So I'm inclined, if there's an opportunity that $30,000, based on the budget numbers the city staff gave us, could fix the problem, that we just go ahead and fix it if we can find $30,000 to do it. That's why I identified it out of the arts funding, which was going from 0 to 60,000. I thought it was more than fair to go from 0 to 30,000 and take 30,000 and address an issue that's been on the back burner for too long. Thank you.
If I could draw you out to clarify, because your comments are very helpful. What you're talking about then, and what you had in mind, was to address streetlights that are within the I don't know what the word would be, the tradition that we have now to provide streetlights on certain street corners, not starting the process, which we also talked about, of additionally adding streetlights in places where we've never done them before.
My hope was that 30,000 would be enough to start addressing both issues.
Okay.
Based on the cost, I think 15 streetlights were quoted at about $2,000 a year. We were told there was slightly over 100 streetlights that were on the waiting list. And so with that math, I thought 30,000 would bring in about, I think the paper said I said 225. I don't recall saying that, but they did the math and decided what I said, so I appreciate that. But I do think that that would provide funding to do both. I think that some people are discouraged from putting in requests for streetlights in areas where they're very sorely needed, because they feel it's a wasted effort if they're just going to be told you're 130th on the list. I'd like to move them up to 84th where Elaine is. Thanks.
Well, she went down. We put her behind a few people.
Councilman.
Oh, sorry.
Councilman Jensen?
So my only two comments are, we have a very large and vibrant art community, and they are very vocal at times, and my concern is that if we take money away from them, even though it hasn't been allocated yet, it's a public number, it's out there, there could be significant backlash from that. Nikki, stab in the dark, what do you think the Westar rate increase is gonna be?
Can I jump in before?
Sure, have at it, please.
you mind? I'm sorry, but I don't think we should worry about this $30,000. I think just based on the fact that we projected the Westar increase so aggressively, we believe that we can eat that $30,000 within there. And if we can't, we'll find it elsewhere in the budget. But I agree, I don't necessarily want to get into the horse trading. Let's trade streetlights for arts, because they're all important, and they're important to different things. So if we can decouple those at this particular point, we, from a staff perspective, and sometimes we make decisions in vapors, we feel fairly confident that we can, if $30,000 clears the list, it's a really good investment of $30,000. And I'm thinking, based on just sketching this out, that based on what we understand about the increase that we put in the Westar budget and what we think the rate's gonna be, though we don't know, if we miss by $10,000-15,000, we can figure it out elsewhere. It's not a big deal.
And if I can jump in on that, this is probably a good time. Staff is prepared, Nikki and Mary from the city attorney's office, with some language for us. The suggestion they made regarding the issue of horse trading, if you will, was that any of our motions should be just an add or a delete or a transfer, as I said earlier, but rather than us, the council, taking responsibility to find where the money would come from for an add. We can talk about it as we are now, but they'll have some language to put on that it will be, we basically will assign the staff to find where the delete would be so that we still balance the budget. So we won't have to do that at the time, unless we get way out of hand with the additions, I'm sure. So, Councilman Shum again, and then I see the other hands.
Thank you very much. And the reason for the horse trading, as you put it, or that language is, if I'm asking for money to be spent from somewhere, I'm looking at the budget, we're spending hours going over the details of the budget. And I recognize that the city staff very carefully allocates our dollars. I don't think it's wise for myself or other council members to say, hey, I've got this great idea, you find the funding. There's a political cost to finding funding, as Councilman Jensen suggested. And I would rather look someone in the eye and say, I suggested that come from an arts budget that was going from 0 to 60, than say, well, I can't get your street done because I put in $30,000 worth of streetlights. And when decisions are left up to staff, I can see how that can come back. I don't mind owning what I do, because that's what I do in my own family budget. If I want to spend something, I have to cut somewhere else. And I have to send that directive to my kids, my wife, hey, Dad's a jerk, we're not getting ice cream because Dad needs to put a new tire on the car. So there's a responsibility there that is why I personally went out and identified the source of funding, because to put it on city staff and say, pull it from somewhere else, gives the impression that they're not doing their job and allocating every dollar, and I believe they are. They're allocating every dollar the best they can, and they're presenting it to us in these budgets. And so if we want something, I think there is a good reason for us as council members to identify where that request is coming from or where it should be funded by. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll get, when we get to where we're going to vote, we'll ask staff to speak up more specifically, but certainly anybody would have the right to go ahead and do a corresponding deduct if they want to. It'll just be a standalone separate motion so that they're not combined. And then if everybody else agrees with you that they want to deduct something that you would suggest, that's fine. If they don't, it can get dealt with.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay.
Right, and so if I can just clarify that. So in that particular case, we're saying that we believe that the $290,000 increase that we have to Westar Electricity will be more than sufficient to absorb that. So to the best of our knowledge right now, that was a very healthy increase that we don't believe is going to be the amount of the increase that they have, though we don't know yet. But it's a very aggressive one.
Okay, there were 3 hands at one point, so if you all can help me with who goes first. Councilwoman Clear.